someone did not make it out alive in Walker Independence.
Oh my.
They sure didn't. Speaking of
They,
tense
I was
episodes,
just going to say.
I loved this episode so much. There were so many reviews of the pilot that were like, how are they going to make this story of a revenge last as a series? And I'm like, have we forgotten what television is like, folks? Have we forgotten that
yes.
there's larger stories? Like this revenge story is just like an entry. And as we saw, like she thinks she's like putting all these, or Abby thinks she's putting all the pieces together, so she's gonna get her quick revenge in and out, and it doesn't go her way. That's obviously what it's like we're gonna keep getting twists and turns. But nothing in this episode was anything like I was expecting to happen, and I loved every second of it. It was so good.
Every last moment. You're right. Abby does think she's so smart. She really is so smart, and so she really thinks she's like laying the groundwork for the traps that she's trying to set. But the thing that she seemed to be missing is that everybody else has their own story going on, and so like you're one piece in this whole cog, and there's a lot happening in Independence that she is not privy to. A lot. I didn't even know it was a is a town in the middle of, it's in the way of a railroad they're building, and that is why Kate is there. And I was like, oh, that explains why Tom is here, because his family is steel and they're ranchers. Two things that he has to keep in mind. I love everyone in this show, including Tom. I love how dastardly he is.
Yeah, everyone has a purpose. And like I said last week, like every two characters, whether it's tension or they have some sort of relationship where you put any two characters in a room and there's something interesting that's going to happen. And that's definitely what happened when Abby had dinner with the man who killed her husband.
Yes.
What an unexpected dynamic. No, I agree. I remember we said last week that Tom was so interesting in like all of the two scenes he was in, and then they did a complete pivot and basically had him like co-lead this episode. There you couldn't have gone 3 or 4 scenes without him popping up in at least one, and I feel like they've pulled the threads on a lot of the stories very early, and yet it's not in the way of what if they run out of thread? Where's the story going to go? It really felt like, I think the thing that surprised me the most is, the way it always feels like there's been a bit of passing of time when the second adventure comes around or when the second episode comes around. The second episode picked right up after the pilot, and yet it was such a different episode from the one that came
Yeah, it
before
was
it.
the same day, right?
Yeah, because they had that scene where
Oh
they
yeah.
were all still there at the gravesite, at Liam's gravesite. And then Hoyt was like, why did we come back here again? And then they talked about the robbery being yesterday. They did an awful lot of work through dialogue to remind us that we're picking up right where we left off. And I'm glad they did, because this episode, it felt like it was an exercise in getting us to know all of the characters better. And I like what you said, how it feels like that Abby's kind of just like stumbled into this world. And I think this episode really highlighted that, because of course episode 1 was very much through her eyes, as it should be. She was the new character in town. And when episode 2 was as well, you kind of just got these half conversations from all the other characters around her, that it just felt like you were picking up, even though you never seen part 1 of those conversations. All these dynamics were established, like the way Hoyt knew Kai, and that Lucia knew that Kai had a thing for Kate. There was so much in so little amount of time. And again, we've barely scratched the surface here as far as all of these dynamics go. But I think that was one of my favorite parts about the episode, is that you got to sit with them a little bit more than you did in the one before.
It made me so excited. It was like, it kind of made me emotional too, in a weird way, because I feel like I haven't been this excited for over a new show since I was like a teenager. So like to be like put into, like, obviously I have a lot of favorite shows and I've liked a lot of shows over the past few years, but like this show just feels so different than anything I've seen past few years. It's like, it feels like CW. It feels exciting. It feels like we're gonna be on this ride. I don't know. It made me feel like emotional and like just so excited, and like I couldn't contain myself watching it. Like I was like laying down and I had to sit up and like look at my laptop because I was like, what? I can't calm down. Um, but oh my gosh. I think after seeing episode 2, I'm ready to name a favorite character, and that is Kate,
Oh,
Ooh,
love
nice.
which
that.
I didn't
Yes.
see coming, which I'm gonna have to talk to you guys off pod about something. pin that for later. Remind me to circle back. But I loved the scene. This is way, I'm getting ahead of us, but the scene in Hagen's, the bar, when they're like putting their plan in motion, which I forgot that it was a plan because Hoyt and Callian start fighting, and I was like, oh no. And I was like, oh, it's Abby's scheme. But the way that Kate stood up for everybody in that room and the way that she's making sure the girls get paid, I was just like, this girl's running the town. And I know she's like the de facto mayor of the town, or like that's how she thinks of herself. But I just love what her character brings to this town. I just love her so much.
She takes care of everybody. Like she makes a point of taking care of everybody. Like even when she paid the girls, she also made sure that Hagen was going to pay them again. He doesn't even know they've already been paid by her, which is good for her. They need extra money. It's hard out here.
Yeah, I love that for her because the interesting thing with how she was handled in episode 1 is she was very much portrayed as the eyes and ears of the town, and you were like, but why though?
Yeah, she's getting everybody's tea.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas in this episode, she was paired with not new people, aka Abby. She wasn't with Abby that much, so you got to see her why she was the eyes and ears of the town, why everybody kind of turned to her, and why she knew everything. And of course, we now know it's portrayed very much quietly, like pushing it under the rug, that she has an alternate agenda, and that's her main reason for being in town. But she's not going to waste her opportunity in town to make a difference. And I love that about her. Again, she wasn't in the episode that much, but that very much came across. Like she asked for the money for bribing people like special agents do, and then just gave it to the girls because they didn't get paid. Love that for her. It's just such a great character.
I love how cool and calm she stays, even when she and the other spy, I don't know what his name was.
When they like his name.
Okay, cool. When they put like they start connecting dots, like they're already like it feels like they're on the same page as Abby. Like even though Kate asked Abby, like, did you know the man who was her husband? Which that scene was brutal. When Tom rode Liam in town. Oh, brutal. And Abby's clearly she's going through it emotionally. And Kate's like, do you know the man? And Abby's like, no. Like, I think Kate's got your number, but she's gonna like tuck it away and be respectful and wait for Abby to open up, I think.
And I think that's what's really interesting, is because there's such a like central mystery here, not to us, not to Abby, not to the people who already know what's going on with the sheriff. Like I said last week, this show is not who killed my husband, it's how do I stop the man who killed my husband. But the interesting thing is there's so many people who don't know this, and yet they're all starting to figure it out quite quickly. I love that. I don't know how it's going to pan out. It makes it more tense because you're not just waiting for the penny to drop for everyone, and where they're all going to have that like, OMG, could he really? No, it wasn't him kind of moment. They're all really starting to suspect something is off with the sheriff right out of the gate, and he's being very clever in trying to cover his tracks because he didn't the first time around. But I think it's raised the stakes something serious. The second episode really went to extreme lengths to raise stakes that were already high.
And they have interesting discussions in the episode too. There's a through line about like what it means to follow the law and due process. And it was interesting that she was the one that started the conversation, because you would think she'd get a little frontier justice. But she, like, if we're talking about Griffin, the man who she isn't aware of, but was working for the Davidson family, getting a fair trial, like, does that mean you want Tom to get a fair trial once you can prove that he was the man who killed your husband? But the fact that, like, it wasn't clear to me whether or not when Callian goes to talk to Augustus, whether they got to finish their conversation before Griffin went charging out on a horse. But the fact that it's Augustus who shoots him and not Tom, and it's with Liam's gun, was a lot for me. He's supposed to be, he's like the law of independence, or should be, had he not been overlooked. He's been there for 2 years. Tom doesn't know anything about the town, but he was put in the position. And there was an undercurrent, like, it's clear that was for racist reasons. And like that Augustus is swallowing that, even though he's been here the longest, and Callian knows it, and those two are talking, which, by the way, still got vibes. I'm still down for these two. But I like that they apparently have more history than ICU going in and out of town. Like they've been on missions together. Like they have a rapport where Callian doesn't let Abby and Hoyt get their suspicions of him going too far because he knows that Augustus is a good man and he just needs to talk to him.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, because Augustus holds so much like to his chest without talking about it, where that's gonna land him. Like he's a good man, but like what exactly is he going to do for the sake of order?
Yeah, he's very loyal, whether it's to his job or I guess maybe blindly to Tom just because he's the sheriff, to the town. I think it'll be harder to get through to him from the Abby's alliance, Abby's angels.
Yeah, and he was that kind of like mysterious character last week. You said you couldn't really pin him down. We knew he was a good person, but he looked at people like he knew more, and it's because he does know more. He knows everything so well, and you really got to know that in this episode. He understands things. He understands the town. He understands the characters, but there's a conflict there now, and yes, it's over the fact he was passed over, but I think that's starting to turn into doubt of the actual sheriff. And again, I love that they brought that up so quickly. It really it adds extra stakes to it, but more than that, it makes Augustus stand out as a character more, and I think this will be a pivotal moment for him. Now that he did do that, he was the one that shot the gun. He might not be as cheery as he was in the first episode going forward. I feel like he'll carry that with him for a while.
Yeah.
Backtracking a little bit, Sabrina mentioned vibes, and just to get a little levity going on, I caught vibes between I feel like they laid some like groundwork just to like test the waters. There was definitely a moment with Abby and Hoyt, can't remember it now, but there was a moment, and there was one with her and Callian when he's looking at her wound, and I was like, what was the little look there? And then there was a shot when me and my cinematography there is a shot, I don't know what part, I think it's later on in the episode where they're like, the three of them are talking about their plan, and it pulls back and it's Hoyt, Abby between them, and then Callian. They're facing each other and she's in the middle. And I was like, that feels symbolic. It was intentional. Not sure if it's setting up like a triangle or just like the dynamic between them is like Hoyt and Callian are always going to have conflict and Abby's going to be in the center of it. But I was picking up the breadcrumbs and I was trying to follow it.
I think it's a triangle. The scene I believe you're talking about is after Abby comes down in Hagen's and she sees Hoyt at the bar, and he gives her this it's so like not necessarily moving, but I was like, oh, I feel bad for Hoyt. But he was talking about what it is to grift, and that he's grifted so long that he doesn't even really know who he is anymore. But she's so sure of who she is. And so he tells her she's going to be fine at the dinner with Tom. And I was like, oh, I really like you two. Like, I like you two a lot. You can tell that Hoyt is sort of he's a character whose heart is in the right place, even if like he's a low down, dirty scoundrel. And he's often stealing things from people. He cares about people who are in his life. And there is a vibe between Abby and Callian, and he's picking up on it, and he doesn't quite like it. And I don't know if that's because he hasn't picked up on the fact that he likes Abby more than he probably should, considering he is supposedly in love with Lucia. But it's there, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works. I think it's one of the reasons why he doesn't quite like Callian. But I also just think that they brush up against one another, because Callian clearly is judgy about Hoyt, but Callian would be, because he knows that you're a criminal, and
he's not wrong. Let's just it's deserved, Hoyt. Just deal with it.
Yes.
Even if these relationships don't turn romantic, like I wouldn't mind. Like there's so much else going on that romance isn't really at the forefront. At least 2 episodes in, I'm not like yearning for romance because there's so much else to connect with. But even like if that's not the trajectory of either relationship, I like the groundwork they're placing, like the connections Abby's making. Like it's clearly very deep. Like they've gotten in together so quickly, so closely. Like they know all of her secrets, they know her truth, and she trusts them. And yeah, like I said, even if it's not turning into something else and it's just like a platonic, because even there were scenes where it was like Abby and her 2 sons, like she was trying to wrangle them up together. And it was really funny.
Yeah, and it feels like now that they ended the episode with their base of operations and they brought Kai into the mix because Kai knew how. Um, the dynamics in this episode were just wonderful. Like you had like Kai and Hoyt who knew each other. Kai and Lucia had that wonderful moment where he like made her the dress. Callian and Augustus, of course. Yeah, incredible.
I love
Incredible.
Kai. He's always like,
Yeah.
"You hungry? Have you eaten today? Did you get a
Yes.
new dress?"
Salt of the earth. But yeah, I feel like this episode went really far to establish all of the dynamics, and I did pick up that scene that Abby had with Callian and that scene she had with Hoyt. Both of them were amazing, and it does feel like they might be heading in the love triangle direction, like that cinematography Reed talked about. That's a Vampire Diaries poster right there, the girl in the middle and the boys on each side.
And speaking of vibes, not to interrupt you, but there's
Go ahead.
one more layer, like the weird, twisted vibes between Abby and Tom. Like
It's a dark romance.
Mhm.
I don't
here.
want to put it out into the universe by any means, but like as soon as I saw them having one-on-one scenes, I was like, oh, I can see this Buffy and Spike. I can see this like complicated alliance. Now he wants her to work with him. Like she's getting in so deep with the man that killed her husband. And I know those lines are going to blur. I just don't know how. I mean, I don't want it to get, it would be really weird. But like the groundwork is being laid as this world getting even bigger and wider and more complicated. And I think that's what blew me away the most about this episode is that like any review that was like, oh, this show, how are they going to outlast it? And then they came in with episode 2, like, here's the material. We can do this for 6 seasons. Just you watch.
Yes. It was unsettling her connection with Tom and because they do have chemistry.
They have a good back and forth.
They do. And he's aware something's not quite right with her.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like circling each other in this very dangerous game. I think my favorite moment, besides when he comes up behind her while she's talking law and she has to flirt with him in order to get like, she's like, I can take you up on that date offer, like that dinner offer, is at their last scene together, which I think is the last scene of the episode, when she's playing that song and he's in the shadow with the hat tipped down and she didn't see him. And I was like, oh girl, I want you to run.
Undertaker vibes, just the silhouette with the hat, I am telling you.
I know, but then he just strolls over to her and he knows what he's doing because he gives her the law book and asks her to work in his office. And I was like, I am uncomfortable, but also I see how you two could work, because he did say that he was looking to find a wife and start a family. But also, if you do know that that's Liam Collins' wife, how dare you?
Right.
It's messed up. But I actually have credit to Kat because they used the camera on her so well to portray like what Abby's really feeling versus what she's putting out into the world. And Kat knows this character so well. She's really game and really feeling everything. And oh my God, just the depth of what she's portraying, like what women have to go through. Like Abby's being forced to confront, to talk to this man with false pretenses just to find some sort of justice for what happened in her life. And it's like, oh, you don't want to watch Abby have to go through this, but the way that Kat is bringing so much truth to how strong this woman is took my breath away in so many scenes.
I know. And they have I guess the remake element has entered the plot that the cast kept talking about, because these characters are very aware of their place in society in America at large in a way that you don't often see in period pieces that are on network TV, because there's a lovely conversation where Callian says, you have to be the one to walk out into this world. Like, we can't do it. And then they use that to their advantage with their scheme, that like Hoyt can do whatever he wants. Like, regardless of the fact that everyone is sort of aware that this man is not to be trusted, he's a white man walking in the world. And Abby can't do certain things because she's a woman. And Callian can't do some things because he's Apache. And so they use that conflict in our society against other people in order to get what they want. And I thought that was brilliant. I was like, yes, because of course people of this time would be aware of how they walk in the world. How would you not be aware of how you walk in the world? But sometimes shows don't show that.
I think the writing in the show is very, very clever. And that makes me intrigued, but also excited to see how they use it in the episodes going forward, because all of that you mentioned played into the dynamics, but it also played a great deal of importance into the story. And I think that highlights the quality of the writing.
For sure. I don't think we can gush more about Walker Independence. I'm sure episode 3 will drop.
I was going to say, yeah, next week we will.
Yeah, and we'll just be gushing even more, especially because to go back to something I said earlier in the pod, I think the mental health thing is going to start with is going to be Augustus, the trauma from having shot someone. And I think because that would have broken his code. Like he like Abby believes in due process, but that man was escaping. But like, I don't know how he's going to contend with how he thinks things should be done versus how he did them in a moment after learning some news he didn't like.
Guys, I love this show. What a journey. Who would have thought?
And it's just getting started.
It is, because we were like, we don't know how it's going to go down, like before we got to see any footage. And now we're like, oh my God, we love it.
We're on the ship.
I mean, love it for us.
Yeah, riding its coattails.